All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into the incredibly fierce debate over crypto regulation. Is it a financial apocalypse just waiting to happen, or is it the future of our economy? The warnings out there are, well, they're pretty intense. So let's cut through the noise and look at the facts. And let's start right here with this really stark warning from Professor Savona, who's a top financial regulator in Italy. And look, he's not just saying crypto is a risky bet. He's calling it a tectonic fault. Think about that for a second. Like a fundamental crack in the very foundation of our entire financial system.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get into the nightmares that are keeping regulators up at night. Then, we'll dissect the anatomy of that financial fear. After that, we'll dig into the much more complicated reality, look at how crypto is actually being used, and finally explore why this is really a debate between generations.
Okay, first up, let's really try to get inside the heads of the regulators. What are they actually seeing? From their perspective, this isn't some brilliant new innovation. It's more like a dangerous illusion.
And Professor Savona uses this really striking analogy. He calls crypto a field of miracles. And yeah, that's a direct reference to the story of Pinocchio. It's this idea of a place where you're tricked into burying your money, with the promise that it'll just magically grow on trees. It's a really powerful image, right? Just pure deception.
Okay, so what exactly are these fears? What are the core arguments that are keeping regulators and, central bankers awake at night? Let's break them down.
All right, so the whole case against crypto really boils down to four main things. First, this idea that it operates in total darkness, a playground for criminals. Second, that it's a lawless Far West. No rules, no protection for you. Third, and this is the big one, the fear of a systemic threat, something that could trigger another 2008-style meltdown. And finally, that it's just an environmental disaster. But here's the thing. When you start to look at the actual data, the picture that emerges is, well, it's a lot more complicated. So let's really unpack the reality behind some of those fears. So let's take that first claim, total darkness. What's fascinating is that the reality is almost the opposite. You could call it radical transparency. Because the blockchain is a public ledger, right? It's out there for everyone to see. And that's exactly how agencies like the FBI and Europol have managed to seize billions in illicit funds. On top of that, you got new rules in Europe that now require crypto companies to collect user data pretty much just like banks have to. Okay, so what about that lawless Far West idea? The notion that this is some town with no sheriff? Well, that's getting really outdated really fast. Especially in Europe, where the whole landscape has fundamentally changed. And the prime example of this? It's a huge piece of regulation from the EU called MiCA. This thing establishes a really clear and, frankly, pretty strict rulebook for anyone operating in the crypto space. So yeah, that Far West, it's getting settled and fast.
And that brings us to maybe the most serious charge of all, this fear of a total systemic collapse. The nightmare scenario where a crypto crash spills over, infects the entire traditional financial system, and wipes out pensions and savings, just like the subprime crisis did back in 2008.
But again, when you look at the actual numbers, they tell a very different story. According to the EU's top markets authority, the entire financial system's exposure to crypto is less than 1%. It's just not big enough, not interconnected enough to cause that kind of catastrophic domino effect.
All right, finally, let's talk about the environment. I mean, we've all seen those headlines, right? Bitcoin's insane energy consumption. But is that really the whole story? Now, don't get me wrong, Bitcoin is definitely still energy intensive, but there's a huge shift happening right now. Turns out, over half of its global mining is now powered by renewables. And why? It's pretty simple, actually. Miners are just chasing the cheapest power available, and more, that's green energy.
And it's not just about energy sources. The technology itself is evolving at a wild pace. Take Ethereum, the number 2 crypto. It recently went through a massive upgrade, and that one change, slashed its energy consumption by 99.9%. I mean, that kind of innovation really challenges that whole permanent environmental disaster narrative, doesn't it?
Okay, so if the biggest risks are starting to be managed through both regulation and innovation, it kind of leads us to the biggest question of all. Beyond all the hype and the speculation, what is this stuff actually for?
So let's move beyond that hype and fear for a minute. Because if you just dismiss it all as gambling, you're missing what's happening in the real world with some very serious institutions, by the way.
Take tokenization, for instance. You've got giants like BlackRock using this tech to issue investment funds right on a blockchain.
Then there's financial inclusion. In countries where inflation is through the roof, stablecoins are literally helping people protect their life savings. And you've got something called fractionalization, which lets younger people get into investing by buying just a tiny piece of a larger asset. These aren't just theories, they're real practical uses happening today.
And that's because, at the end of the day, this isn't just some dry, technical debate about financial plumbing. It's really a much deeper conversation about trust, about access, and frankly, about what a whole new generation wants and expects from the world of finance.
And this table really gets to the heart of it. For a lot of young people, when they look at the traditional system, they see something that's slow, it's expensive, and its trust has been damaged by scandals and bailouts. So when they see crypto, with its transparency and lower barriers to entry, they don't see a threat. They see a practical alternative that just speaks their language.
And this is maybe the most crucial point to understand. The world of crypto is not standing still. It's actively maturing. You've got more regulation coming in, like MiCA, you've got new real-world use cases like tokenization, and it's becoming way more sustainable. The whole space is evolving right before our eyes.
And this really brings us back to the core of the whole debate. If you just reject this technology out of hand, you're basically ignoring the huge social demand that's driving it. The goal shouldn't be to fight innovation, but to figure out how to govern it, how to channel it, so that it actually becomes a valuable complement to the existing financial system.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. I mean, history is just littered with new technologies that were first feared and then eventually accepted, right? So maybe the real challenge isn't deciding if crypto is a nightmare or a dream. Maybe the real challenge is figuring out if we have the wisdom to govern it properly. Thanks for joining this explainer.